Good afternoon and welcome to Just Jocelyn. We have a very important guest here today, Mr. Wayne Saya. Welcome. And we've got quite a bit of breaking news. We've got quite a bit of interesting events that are going on here in Nashua. So we're going to dive right into them. First off, I think you have an announcement before I dive in and ask you any questions.
Well, I first wanted to congratulate the city, but in particular the Nashua Police Department and Chief Kevin Rourke and his men for their. They have a major contribution in Nashua receiving the Safest City in the Country award.
Oh.
And
wow.
So with Nashua receiving that, and I went to the Board of Aldermen meeting this past Tuesday, and I also congratulated the board members and the mayor himself. But I think the major contributing factor to that, from my position, is with regard to the to Kevin Rourke and the men that he has there. They've really done a fantastic job, especially when working with the kids. Because let's face it, crime amongst juveniles is down 20% in the city. And that doesn't happen unless the police are working with the community.
Correct.
So I'd like to congratulate the department.
Absolutely.
himself.
So congratulations to the Nashua Police Department and the Chief of Police, to everybody that's been contributing to the safety of this city. That's brilliant. Coming from a blue family, yay guys, yay ladies. All right. So with that note, that was positive to start with. Thank you. We don't have enough of that every day.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We've got an issue about these, pain in the neck, electronic ballot counting machines. So going back a bit, 43 years, say, they were supposed to be on a trial basis.
Well, they were. There's a law was passed where the law specifically states that the electronic tabulating machines would be a trial and would be to see how things worked out.
Right, but we've gone on 40 years plus. It's never, we the people, we the taxpayers, we the voters, we the citizens, never voted to change the state constitution to allow these permanently. And that's a problem. The legislature cannot just arbitrarily add that in and change the voting laws willy-nilly. So over these 40 plus years, the taxpayers, through our property taxes, have been paying for these machines. They're also very old, and they are pirating parts from other machines, which makes it very dangerous, health-wise, safety-wise, but also that they're extremely hackable.
Well, one of the previous shows I did with you, I believe I explained that I was an expert witness in a case in Rockingham County.
Correct.
About a year and a half ago or something like that. The Attorney General of New Hampshire went down there in person with his lieutenants and filed a motion to keep me off the witness stand, which they succeeded in providing information on that case and to the court with regard to the safety and efficacy of those machines.
Correct.
Which kind of disturbed me, because why would an Attorney General who is charged with promoting safety to the state try to keep a safety issue from being exposed on the witness stand?
Correct.
But having said that,
we have the issue of new electronic ballot counting machines that were up in Concord, and people were able to go test them and put their ballots through them. This is now coming up again with an election.
Well, there is a case in the New Hampshire Supreme Court right now. I believe the case is Sununu versus Richard. Richard versus Sununu.
Correct.
And that case is challenging the ballot machines, particularly, especially since a couple of cases have come out recently, one in particular in Arizona, where Arizona challenged the machines themselves because their constitution does not permit it.
Correct.
Well, that's the same here in New Hampshire.
Correct.
Although the Constitution doesn't particularly say or specifically say that electronic voting machines are not
right, but unless there's an amendment or it's changed, it has to be per the, I forget which federal case it is. The name always escapes me. That the Constitution must be.
Well, there's Moore versus Harper.
Thank you. That's it. Where it has to be interpreted as it was written at the time.
Well, yes, and I think what is now happening, especially with the Bruin decision, and I'm not going to get into a lot of law because I'm not an attorney, right. But these are cases that were cited just recently in the Richard case.
Correct.
In the state Supreme Court here in New Hampshire. And what the Supreme Court said is that states and the legislature are required to follow the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And the legislature cannot be used to overstep the Constitution.
Correct.
And that's how Arizona succeeded in their case.
Yep.
That's how.
So how does that pertain to
right now,
in Nashua?
And right now, Nashua is trying to do a little end around here. They're trying to sneak something in, and that is it's a resolution 23-165, which is adopting the use of new electronic ballot counting machines. Mm-hmm. Now, I think I have two problems with that. One, I addressed to the council last Tuesday, and that issue is with regard to let's just wait and let's hold off until the Supreme Court of New Hampshire makes a decision on the case that they've got.
Yep.
Why would you want to either lease or spend money on machines that you may not be able to use to begin with and start using
Correct.
taxpayer money to do that? Mm-hmm. And I called upon the board to table that matter, to table the resolution until the issue is heard. Now, whether they hear me or not, I don't know, because they haven't been listening to the people recently anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that as a vindictiveness. I'm just saying that when people go and address the board, as a few other people have recently learned, there have been major decisions made against the city council and against the mayor by the New Hampshire Supreme Court,
right.
Specifically on the Lori Ortolano case, mm-hmm. or cases, where Lori was given over $150,000 in restitution to pay for her legal fees.
Correct.
And that comes out of taxpayer money.
Mm-hmm. So it would behoove them to slow down, take a minute, and let's find out what's going on at the Supreme Court before they dive in. And because I know you have a lot to talk about. So to finish off on that subject, who actually decides what machines are going to be used? Does each town get to say, I want Dominion and I want this one and I want that one? Or is there a central? There's
a statute, part of the voting statute in New Hampshire gives that chore to an unelected body. Which again is part of the issue that I believe is in the Supreme Court right now.
Correct.
And it's and I for the life of I can't remember the name of the body, although I've been talking about.
I know. The minute you said it's the voter election.
Yeah, I think it's called
or something like that.
I think it's called an old man's lapse or something like that. But one of the issues here is the fact that. I should say the second issue that's caught up is this, as I've stated in the mask mandate issue, this is a non-home rule state.
Okay,
so
that
means that if there is a law that the state has already passed, mm-hmm. a city or town cannot make their own law.
Yeah.
They have to follow the state law. If there isn't a state law in place, then cities or towns are allowed to make their own laws, mm-hmm. or municipal laws, which are done in ordinances. However, there is already a state law with regard to electronic machines.
Okay.
And here you have 23-165 adopting the use of new electronic ballot counting machines. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to say, okay, there's a law in the books with the state, but we want to adopt them too. Well, there's a conflict there. Mm-hmm. And the conflict is they are trying to tell the state, we're going to adopt them. We know you've already adopted them on a temporary basis. We're going to adopt them here as a permanent resolution and then as a permanent ordinance.
Which you can't do if there's already an existing state law.
No, because state law is still in effect.
Okay.
Okay, when state law no longer becomes in effect, okay, then then they can go and move with that.
Okay.
Now, are they going to wait and see what the court rules on? And if the court says that statute is unconstitutional, they've already got the resolution, then slam right away and put this in? I mean, I don't know what their reasoning is. I just know that there's a conflict with an existing state law. There's a conflict with regard to a case that's pending in the New Hampshire Supreme Court that should be tabling this move right now.
And not spending taxpayer money or asking the taxpayers at this
point. Look, would you approve the purchase and use of new expensive equipment for your family that you know may not be permitted to be used in the future?
No.
I mean, that's the way that the board, that the council should be looking at it.
Right.
Because it is actually our money. It's our taxpayer money.
Correct.
And this is an issue for the people, not for them. So if they're going to use the existing statute to select the machine, then that means that they are following an existing state law, which is then illegal. They can't even select a machine unless they have their own law when the existing law is no longer in place.
Gotcha.
And that would be my position.
Okay. So you also had brought up that there is an existing COVID mask mandate.
Yes.
And my question to you is, how does it affect businesses?
Well, the mandate, according to the city and according to the mayor and according to the Board of Aldermen, is a recommendation. However, the court didn't really delve into that. They gave there wasn't a specific claim made in my complaint when it went to the federal court with regard to 065, 21-065.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because I was arguing something else. But then when the state came up and the legislature passed the what I call the Liberties Act, in other words, if the governor decides that they want to have a state of emergency, there's a new law in New Hampshire now that says that state of emergency cannot take away a person's liberties or liberties rights.
Yep.
So now that that's in place for people and for churches, by the way, there's a second statute that was placed that allows you to go to church even if there's a state of emergency.
Right.
Having said that, my position is if Nashua decides that they want to tell businesses or let businesses know that, there's a statute in place that gives a recommendation, and guess what? This is a firm recommendation. There's a thing in that recommendation that says whether were given the jab or whether you weren't given the jab, there's no way to determine whether or not you have. So therefore, you have to make sure that everybody wears a mask.
Right.
And to me, that's the component within this recommendation, so-called recommendation, that is unconstitutional. And but again, that wasn't really addressed with the court fully because the court only used one sentence within the my lawsuit itself. And so therefore, I really didn't argue that strenuously, and actually I didn't argue it as a claim in my complaint. So the court claimed that my complaint was moot, and the reason they said the complaint was moot was because the city said Ordinance 003 and 006 have been rescinded, and therefore there's no longer a mask mandate. The city never put in 065. I then came back and said, wait a second, 065 is in there. If I put that as a claim, it would have been a different story.
Gotcha.
The court could not have mooted the claim.
Right.
Then they would have had to at least heard arguments on it. I mean, and a Boston attorney actually told me that he said, Wayne, you're a regulatory guy. You're not a lawyer. You probably should have done it this way instead.
Gotcha.
And now I know.
All right. So, well, that brings us up to date on that one.
Well, one other thing, if I may, and that is, if a business decides that they're going to do that, I'm going right back into federal court again.
I was just going to ask you, I was just going to say, so if that mandate comes back up, if it rears its ugly head again,
Well,
Would
then
you'd go back to court
well,
with
I'm
that?
going right back into court
Yep.
again, and I am going to put in 065
right.
as a claim.
Yep.
But the thing that I'm sort of saddened about is that the business itself is now going to have to come in as a defendant. So hypothetically, say Macy's decides they want to do that. Macy's going to become a defendant, which means they're going to have legal fees
Right.
in arguing this. Say a pizza place decides they want to do it. That pizza place is going to have to hire a lawyer because I'm going into federal court and I'm going to challenge them on that.
Right.
And then they're going to come back and say, well, there's a statute on it that says I'm required to because I don't know if you have had the jab or not had the jab. Mm-hmm. And that's when the case will then explode and say, and the court will now have to step in and say, okay, this isn't a recommendation, it is a mandate because these businesses are treating it as a mandate.
Correct.
And that, I think, during an election year, the council should do the right thing. Be a bunch of heroes and say, let's take this monkey off the business's back.
Correct.
And let's not have them involved in this.
Well, exactly. They need to make sure that they can conduct their business so that they can receive their taxes.
Yeah.
And, the people can actually go to these businesses and frequent them and spend their money there.
Well, it'd be easier for me to sit with the business and say, look, let's do this here.
Yep.
Let me make an arrangement with you. I can't do that with this statute.
Right.
Okay.
So
with this ordinance.
needs to go. Yeah.
With 065, I can't do that because the business is going to come back and say, there's an ordinance here that says I have to treat you as though you've had the jab.
Right. Or haven't had the jab.
Or haven't had the jab.
Right.
So
Whichever way
my hands are tied.
Yep.
And that's what businesses are going to
Wow. All right. So you went on Tuesday to the city council and you listened in on their meeting. And you had mentioned to me that it's been 3 months since the 2022 financial report was due. So the fiscal year ended June 30th, so the new fiscal year should have started July 1st of this past summer. But you didn't have a financial report yet. What was
Well,
that
I mean, I don't know if it was
about?
due on the 30th, but there should be a reasonable time or reasonable expectation for a citizen to get a copy of the annual financial report for the previous fiscal year, which was 2022.
Right.
Graciously, one of the council members, when I told him I was here, that's a copy of the so-called report.
What do you mean so-called?
Well, first let me explain that a council member gave me a copy of that.
Okay, but before it does say ended June 30th, so the fiscal year did end June 30th.
Yeah, but the complication is that it was written as a draft. It wasn't written as a final report.
Well, why would you do that?
Well, I don't know. I know that there's some
missing or
there's some complications going on with regard. There's a lot of information missing out of there. Oh. And I'll give you an example. If the city is trying to find out where to put a certain amount of money, whether it's hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, and they don't know where to put it or how to put it, or whether or not it's even legal to put it, and they leave it out of the report, all those graphs and charts are no good. Because now that information is not incorporated in the report.
Got you, and which obviously changed them.
Well, in this particular report, there's about a little over $7 million that I can't find that's supposed to be in that report. $7
million with an M?
Yes, $7 million with an M, that actually that is taxpayer money that was used to pay for the Arts Center on Main Street in Nashville.
Okay.
And there is a lot going on. I mean, I've got people working on this, and the person that is really spearheading that entire effort is Lori Ortolano. I mean, she's a firecracker when it comes to that because she wants to protect her own
investments
in the city.
Well, as would any other taxpayer. I mean, there needs to be. I hate the word transparency because there isn't. I mean, their transparency is like a black piece of cloth with two little holes in them. That's not transparency. We need to know where our taxpayer dollars are going at all times because it's our money and they're charged with using our money in a proper fashion, and we're finding federally, statewide, locally, that this is just not happening with our elected officials?
Well, I'm very familiar with something that's called the Federal New Markets Tax Credit
I was going to ask you if that was involved in it there. So you're pretty familiar with it. So
my office was in D.C. for many years.
Okay.
And in Southwest D.C., a lot of programs were implemented over there using that tax credit program for businesses to invest in the area. But there was, and when the nonprofit that I was running at the time was overseeing some of this stuff. When I say overseeing, I mean giving some advice and help on some of these businesses that wanted to open in that area because they would get good tax credits in doing so. There were certain stipulations and requirements that we had to explain to them were required to be followed.
Okay.
And when I take a look at how everything was played out in the Art Center, and I've had some discussions with Lori about this, I was really surprised that they were even allowed to even implement that program, because you've got a shoe store that they were going to gut. Instead, they end up tearing it down and building up, and there's an issue there. I'm not going to get into the legality of it here, but there's some major issues there, especially when you've got. And I'll give you a very quick example. The city loan was signed December of 2020, and that was and the city of Nashua contributed $7,108,000 and some change, and that loan was to 201 Main Street financing. The city of Nashua is a senior leveraged lender for the new market tax credit, but here. Cutting to the chase, the people in the city invested more than $7 million, I will say. And I won't get into the whole chart because there's still a lot to digest. But new market tax credit's not complicated. It's the way that it was put together here that's extremely complicated.
Okay.
Sort of like a Ponzi scheme. But when you've got that amount of money missing, over $7 million out of this report. And that's why this report is not final.
Got you.
That's why it's a draft, because that a lot of that stuff has to be brought out in the forefront, because you're talking a federal issue here. And when I was sitting in the council room on Tuesday, I was a little bit blown away because I wasn't expecting some people to get up and address the council and advise the council that they need to take a firm look at this, because there is some misappropriation of fund issues that could very well be having the federal people come down and check out what the heck is going on here.
Yeah.
But also, you've got state implications, and I know that there's some issues that serious issues that are being looked at by the state attorney general in this particular case. And I'm saying to myself, they've been looking at this for a little while, and the state is in a bit of a jam right now with regard to the electronic voting machines, because it was the attorney general's office that tampered with the machines and kept it from the public by not allowing me to testify on that.
Right.
It's very interesting. Are there any deals going on behind the scenes with regard to the mayor and the attorney general's office? I don't know. It's interesting to on what's going on here, and but I think that within the next month or two, I'll probably know everything that's going on.
I was going to say, is there a timeline where there might be some answers? Have they, in the remaining time that we have, have they acknowledged this problem with the $7 million?
Well, I'm in the background on this.
Okay, so that's something.
And this is Lori's deal.
I was going to say more for Lori.
Lori and another partner of hers really uncovered this.
Okay.
And I've been looking at it with a different set of eyes.
Got you. So them showing up on Tuesday and you being there on Tuesday and bringing this up has sort of sort of first light on it at this point?
Yeah, I was just looking for a copy of the document because earlier that day I went to City Hall. Nobody knew what I was talking about.
Oh.
And I'm saying, this is kind of odd. So let me go to the board. And I haven't been to the board or the council chamber in
For a long
25
time.
years.
Yeah.
Last time I was there, I was arguing on behalf of my 6-year-old daughter with regard to her diet over at the junior high school.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how long I haven't been there.
Wow.
And
but this was there.
This was in the hands of one of the council
members.
members.
And they gave it to you on Tuesday
night. And he
night.
stood up, he says, here you go. And I'm
nice.
thinking that he's handing me a completed copy of it, and I thanked him very much. I know that it was televised, so anybody can go back and look and see how that played out. The councilman was very gracious about it. I don't think the council really knows the depth of the implications that are involved here.
Right.
I mean,
and the people that would be involved in it, state and federal, potentially.
They can't. The biggest issue that happens when people do the wrong thing is the cover-up.
Yeah.
I think the council needs to say, okay, I'm not getting involved in any cover-up here. What the heck's going on here? What did we approve? Because the stuff that is on this spreadsheet here is not approved by the council. What was approved by the council is something entirely different than what's going on right now. And that is the major issue here.
And
that's the issue that the state attorney general, he needs to get off his rear, and he needs to find out what's going on. Because, what happens if the feds get involved faster than the state, and the state's got, egg on their face, that they knew this has been going on for a couple of months. They're not saying anything about it. The papers aren't saying anything about it. It's been out in the public to a certain extent. And everybody's just keeping their mouth shut. I think it's time that people start
questioning everything that's going on, and don't just accept on the face that, well, we're going to get new machines, or whether we're going to do a mask mandate, or what is the financing for the Arts Center, and why is this still a draft? People need to be asking about that.
There are too many issues now going on in City Hall and with the mayor's office that now, if it was just a mask, if it was just a couple of other issues, that's probably
You're
politics.
Looking at a list at this point.
Now it's getting to a point where it's looking like there's something nefarious going on over there. We need to find out what's going on.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you sharing with me and our audience here in Nashua what's going on. We do need to be diligent. We all need to be absolutely sure that we are holding our legislators, our council people, selectmen, whatever it is for your town or city, holding them accountable, because they do answer to us. And we have to realize that we are the employers, they're the employees, and we need to make sure that they answer to us. So I hope you will come back and update us again.
I will.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right. And we will see you next time. Remember, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. And if you're not paying attention, you're not going to know what's going on. See you next time.